Welcome to CHAP Insurance Talk, an interview about risks and safety. This time I have the pleasure to welcome here Michaela Koller, Director General of Insurance Europe, the European Insurance and Reinsurance Federation. Michaela has worked in Brussels for the last 20 years and joined Insurance Europe in February 2007 and now joined CHAP Insurance Talk. Welcome, Michaela. Thank you for accepting the invitation.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, and a special thanks to Jan Matuszek and CHAP for the good cooperation.
By the way, what do you like the most on the insurance sector?
What I like most about the insurance sector, it's diversity. You know, it covers every aspect of our life, and without insurance, the work wouldn't run. And this is also then obviously reflecting in my daily life. So, diversity.
What is the role of Insurance Europe?
Well, Insurance Europe is the European umbrella trade body. We have 37 members, national insurance associations, federations, and we represent all insurers, direct insurers, small insurers, big insurers, reinsurers. And our role is essentially to represent their interests vis-à-vis European institutions, but also at global level. So it's really representing the insurance industry and making sure that their interests are properly heard in these discussions.
So it's a very strong voice, I would say. And that one you also use now together with Invest Europe. Insurance Europe have published a joint position paper that calls on the European Commission to make improvements to Solvency II. What exactly do you propose?
Well, maybe if you give me 2 minutes, I think it requires a little bit of introduction and some background on Solvency II. Not everybody is familiar with it. In the end, what does Solvency II do? In the end, it makes sure that insurers can essentially keep their promises vis-à-vis policyholders. You know, we need to reserve enough capital. Now, Solvency II was introduced 5 years ago, but when it was introduced, it was a huge paradigm shift. And what we experience is, as always with a new system that is introduced, there are a couple of flaws. And we have also these flaws, measurement flaws, and some excessive operational burdens, and we like to see them addressed. And why do we like to do this? Because we see that, you know, when you have too much capital, sometimes people think it can only be good. But what we see is that it can affect customers negatively. They could, for example, it could make insurance products more expensive, or it could lead to the fact that customers do not get the full benefits because we have all this capital lying idle on the balance sheet. So what we want to ensure is that we have the appropriate level of capital, and Invest Europe, to come to your question now, is essentially the European trade body that represents the equity and fund industry, and they really very much share our views on Solvency II. And what they and we jointly are now asking for is essentially to improve Solvency II, to free up the risk-taking capacity of the European insurance sector, to avoid unnecessary increases in capital, and to improve the equities in the Solvency II framework. So in a nutshell, that's the purpose of the cooperation.
Yeah, thank you for the explanation, because definitely Solvency II is not an easy topic, and always is good to have a more precise explanation. But you also cooperate with EIOPA, European Insurance and Occupational Pensions Authority. Do you see any trends there that need to be noticed?
Yeah, you know, I work with EIOPA now for all the time I'm with Insurance Europe. Originally, they were CEOPS, and I know them still when they were 10 people in the office. Now there are 170. They will be growing another 35, and obviously that changes the entire setup, that changes also the approach. EIOPA has become very ambitious over the years. They are certainly having the ambition to become a true supervisor. I think it is important to note that right now EIOPA is an advisor to the Commission, to the European institutions about everything that relates to insurance and occupational pensions. And we like that they are giving this European perspective, they are collecting the data, they are doing the analysis. They would, of course, like to see an even larger role for themselves. And I think we would be a little bit more skeptical. We see the value of national supervision. So there is ambition on their end. There is support on our end for the role they currently have. And it will be interesting to see how this will develop moving forward. They will have a new chairperson as of September. And it's a woman. And I'm very much looking forward to Petra Hielkammer taking over at the helm. And I think it will be very interesting because she's a long-standing supervisor. She knows EIOPA very well. And I think this will be a good cooperation.
And another topic for EIOPA, in April, it announced a consultation on a framework to address value for money risk in the European unit-linked market. What position does Insurance Europe has on that?
Well, you know, we are a bit concerned about that because I think we cannot complain that insurance is under-regulated. And certainly when it comes to the whole area of conduct and customer protection, if anything, there is probably even too much. And now EIOPA is adding yet another layer, and they are looking very much in the product field. But we have already a very robust framework. So there is a lot of concern about what is currently being prepared by EIOPA. It looks very detailed. It seems to add, you know, additional complexity. And while we have not yet finished the consultation with our members on how we will in detail respond, I think it's fair to say right now that we are not overly excited about the plans.
But it should be a step towards the stronger capital markets union. How do you see this initiative of European Commission?
We are very supportive of the Capital Markets Union, and we have been since its inception. If anything, the COVID-19 outbreak has further magnified the challenges of Europe, and therefore, you know, a strong capital market union is certainly of benefit. Now, what do we mean when we talk about a strong capital market union from the perspective of insurers? For us, it means correcting the flaws of Solvency II, having the right pipelines to invest in for insurers to invest in. So we definitely support it and how do we feel this should be done? Well, first, Solvency II, it should address the flow. Then we need an adequate pipeline of suitable long-term projects to invest in. We need a healthy participation by retail clients. We need a promotion of long-term pension savings, facilitating cross-border investment, etc. So for us, the list is long, but the support is there.
How do you view the plans considering disclosures and distribution as another area of that CMU covers?
Look, for us, disclosures are, of course, a tool to make customers understand our products better. Now, the problem that we see is that right now, based on European legislation, it is a real challenge for customers to understand our products. Why? Because based on European law, we are currently obliged to drown customers in information. We give them 190 pre-contractual information requirements. We sometimes give them incorrect information because we are obliged to use methodology that the Commission designed with other providers in mind, more the asset management industry. And we have to give them sometimes inconsistent and overlapping information. So for us, we would like to inform our clients, so that they really understand the product. We have also learned in the crisis now that there was too much focus on costs. We need to give information on 7 different cost streams, but we do not give them enough information on cover. So for us, it is important to get the right information across and in a targeted manner so that people see the wood for the trees.
Now another topic also connected with trees and wood, but as the right meaning, the green agenda, because as the Europe's largest institutional investor with more than 10 billion euros of assets management or of assets under your management, the insurance industry can play a key role in the transition towards carbon neutral and, let's say, sustainable economy. How do you assess the green agenda as such?
Well, first we have 10 trillion, not 10 billion assets under management.
Yeah.
Huge difference. And of course, from the start, we have been very supportive of the Green Deal, the Green Agenda. We were worried in the beginning because it was targeted only at the financial sector. But then with the Green Deal, the Commission essentially rolled it out to the entire economy. And we believe that was healthy and that really works because it gives a much broader vision. And when every element of an economy works towards green transition, then of course we will get to the right result.
So how important is the EU taxonomy for insurance companies, or how important it will be?
Well, the taxonomy plays a key role. Because at the end of the day, hopefully based on scientific data, we will have a clear idea what is green, what is brown. And what we want to avoid is, especially both as investors, but also as, in the end, also as underwriters, what we want to avoid is that, we have the wrong idea about what in the end is green. So the taxonomy will help us to ensure, based on clear scientific analysis, to have the right approach. And what is more important, this is happening at European level. That means everybody takes the same definitions, and this makes the whole thing much more reliable and comparable. And that is what we need also as investors.
Yeah, because every insurance company will have the same base for accepting or for maintaining the green agenda. The new European Commission has also been focused on its digital agenda and published a digital finance strategy for the EU. What reaction can we expect from the insurance sector?
Again, very supportive. We have for a long time, and by the way, I think I have even forgotten that earlier in the consumer discussion that we had. Right now everything is paper-based, and if we have learned anything in the pandemic, then clearly that digital was maybe for too long underestimated, also in European legislation. So COVID-19 has now really further pushed and emphasized the need to move to a more digital environment. For us, the important thing is that in legislation, and when we develop legislation at European level, that we remove all barriers that would push us back into a more paper-based environment. And of course, digital means much more than just moving from paper to digital. We also use different means, and the new digital plan of the Commission is so broad. It encompasses so many different areas, ranging from cyber to cloud to artificial intelligence to data, open finance. So there is a wealth of initiative, and from the insurance sector, a lot of work to do, and definitely a lot of support also.
Yes, and it also counts for the Czech Republic. And now I would like to get to the point a bit of comparison of the European insurance market, what are the main differences between more mature insurance markets and those that joined the EU later, as the Czech Republic?
I think the main difference is probably when you look at insurance penetration. I have a couple of figures there, and allow me that I check that. In 2019, which is our last reference point, what we can see is that the Czech Republic's level of insurance penetration stood at 2.8% of GDP. This is when you look at 32 European countries, the Czech Republic is ranks place 19, so 19. This compares to 2.7% in Poland, 2.5% in Hungary, Slovakia 2.4%. But France, for example, which is the top market, has 9.2% of insurance penetration. Now, what does this mean? Penetration normally goes hand in hand with economic development. You know, an economy that is hugely developed needs insurance to keep the risks under control. And what we see in developing market, you know, you start normally with motor insurance, you move out towards fire property, but the more developed market becomes, the more sophisticated also the insurance coverage becomes. Health insurance, a big topic, I know also in the Czech Republic, is definitely underdeveloped. Also, we look at natural catastrophes. You had this very bad tornado last night, I think. I watched the reports on TV this morning. And when you see EIOPA has developed dashboards about natural catastrophe risk, and you see that there is a protection gap of 1 billion for, you know, hurricane related events, then you know there is a lot to do for the Czech insurance market, and a lot that can be taken away from in terms of risk from the population and from the economy.
But definitely we can see it as a huge potential of not only the Czech market, but the whole region, as I hear the numbers. How will the pandemic change the insurance market? You've already spoken about the digital change that we had to go through, but that's not the only thing, I guess.
No, I mean, when we look forward, you know, we look, of course, always what are the future trends. Of course, other risks like cyber will probably rank higher and higher on our agenda. This is probably the next big event that we will be facing. But what will remain on the agenda is definitely the digital development, the green development, and we will look more into health issues. Long COVID will be something that we will be covering in the next couple of years, unfortunately. And so certainly, you know, there is no lack of challenges also moving forward.
So I see loads of challenges ahead of you. Insurance sector, it means ahead of you. Michaela Koller, as the Director General of Insurance Europe, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you.
And thank you for inviting me.
Thanks. And I thank you for following us. This is not the only interview that you can watch, as a CHAP Insurance Talk has much more to offer, and you can just look at our YouTube channel or at your favorite podcast application. Have a nice day.